So in the last video, I talked about how there was two priorities to feel kind of moved into the house. One was to get my workspace kind of set up, which I more or less have done, and you probably saw that in the last video. And the second thing, you can probably guess because it's around me right now, was to set up the climbing wall. So I took it apart in another video, but I didn't actually film that. So I figured it was worthwhile to go through how I took it apart. And then I'll show you kind of the reassembly of the whole thing, as well as maybe some upgrades I'm going to try to do to it, and I'll explain that when I get to it. So here we go. Alright, so basically there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, there's a piece behind there, 12 pieces to the wall now. So I took it off in kind of different pieces so it'd be easier to move as well as to put back together, hopefully fairly quickly, which we'll show you now. And I kept all of the hardware that mounts all the wood back together handy, and I have labeled it all in this bag so I can kind of go through and know what goes where. And again, hopefully it makes it kind of easy to assemble, kind of like a rickety IKEA set. So I'm gonna get going and show you what the wall looks like back together. Alright, so here you see how I labeled all of the components to make it a little bit easier on myself. You might get to see some details in this footage that wasn't in the original build video, like the bracing and the butt ton of screws. This jack also came in handy again. You could still reassemble without it, but it makes it easier when you're doing it alone. Again, be careful. You also can see how I used moving wrap, which is reinforced by duct tape, to hold together loose items throughout. It actually was really handy. It definitely helped moving these massive legs that I left chained together. As mentioned in the last video, the footage might also help illustrate the struggle with moving this alone after surgery. After attaching the straps, I could have just lifted it without the jack, but spanned out this wide wasn't optimal, and this was just faster. Once the apex was up, I continued with the straps alone, no problem. Also, make sure to check for square before sheathing. Woo! Sweet, sweet success. And the old quality assurance check. The legs were not properly attached yet, no locking pins, and no plywood. Pretty damn sturdy, if you ask me. Alright, so I took a bit of a break and now it's nighttime again, but I got to the point where I can start to lift the panels into place. I could have done it like we did it before when we actually built the wall, but it's harder in some ways and it's easier in other ways. The way that it's harder to do it this way now, to add the panels, is because they're heavy and I have to lift them into place. So I'm going to try to put a bolt in the back of the T-nut and then ratchet strap the panel up, and then maybe get my helper to come help me actually screw the panels in and keep them straight. And then I'm just going to leave it for the night, and I'll get to the upgrades and the things I want to do to change it a little bit tomorrow, or maybe even the next day. We'll see how the day/night goes. In hindsight, I think the way we added the paneling before was less infuriating, safer, and overall better. It's funny how when you cut out all the head scratching, struggling, and cursing, how short this footage actually is compared to the time it really took. Not to mention how much easier. But Laura's body language throughout this says it all. So, good experiment, but sheathing on the ground would definitely be the way to go. Alright, time for bed. Alright, so day 2 out here, and I have this convenient hammock chair mounted to the climbing wall. It's a pretty good spot for it. And I'm going to try to put together one of the upgrades I talked about for the climbing wall right now, I guess. And I'm going to be using some scrap pieces of wood I have lying around because wood is still super expensive. And I'm going to try to put together something, but I don't really want to talk about it yet because I'm not sure what I'm doing and it might change as I make it. So maybe you can follow along and try to guess what it is. Alright, so I had to end the project a little early the other night to try to make sure that I didn't piss off the neighbors with all my power tools, so we're gonna get back to it today and hopefully tick off some of these upgrades, so let's just get to it. Alright, so if seeing me add the wheels to this wasn't really obvious, I've made it so I can move the wall to different spots on this concrete pad, and if I ever need to move it somewhere else in the yard, hopefully that becomes easier. So the fold in the middle of this doesn't really have, super huge purpose. It's just so it's easy to fold up and store away and doesn't take as much space. as well as this kind of span here means that I can ensure that the legs kind of stay the proper width apart, which is 8 feet. So it just means when I move it, it kind of all moves as one unit. And obviously the pedals over there lift up the wall to use those casters so I can move the entire wall. So I'm just going to pivot it and move it just slightly because it's a little close to the edge here, and I actually want to push it back. So I'm just going to give it its first little test drive and see how it goes. Push this guy over. There we go. Nice. Pretty smooth. Oh yeah. And then for this, it's easier to remove it with 2 people. One person can lift the leg, the other person can slide it out. If you're doing it alone, I probably would put like a through bolt through here with some type of handle to keep it safer. You're probably going to use your foot to push it out. Again, when you have it all locked up, this isn't crazy heavy, but you should still watch your posture and do a proper deadlift if you're going to be lifting this so you don't hurt yourself. There's probably some other ways to do it. I just built it this way so they get kind of locked in here and stay, and rounding out the edges and rounding out these kind of brackets that they sit in means that no matter which angle the leg's at, they'll still fit into this and kind of stay put. So yeah, I'll just try to do it by myself right now because my helper's right there. Let's see if I can be successful. Go, and 1. Yeah, reasonably easy. And number 2. A little bit harder. There we go. So again, probably 2 people if you're gonna do that yourself. But yeah, I think it works pretty nicely. So other than the hammock chair being temporarily installed here, update number 1 is kind of complete. And now we'll get to upgrade number 2, which isn't as exciting, but definitely necessary. Alright, so the last upgrade, like I said, not terribly exciting, but this is the back tarp for the climbing wall. I've painstakingly added snaps throughout the entire piece of tarp and reinforced it so that I can just snap it to the back of the wall and remove it when I need to. I used to have these thin ribs made out of pressure treated wood that I just screwed along it to keep it in place, which maybe had more holding power, but meant it was really annoying to remove. So, no more of those. Now we have this tarp. And part of the reason for it is that if I need to get behind it to repair T-nuts, it's easy to just remove this tarp, as well as there might be some more things I want to do in the future, and this makes that a lot easier. So yeah, I'll just show you how I kind of put it on and take it off, and that's kind of it for the upgrades today. Just worth noting here, the heavier the tarp, the better, but regardless, you definitely need to reinforce your tarps if you use snaps. The snaps will hold, but the tarps will fail. Also, the more snaps, the better. I actually plan on adding more in the future. Alright, so I guess that's kind of it for this video. I didn't want it to get too long, so there are other upgrades I plan to make in the future, but this was just supposed to be like an update video and just kind of a quick in and out. So hopefully this gave you some ideas of some things you can do to kind of upgrade or modify your climbing wall to make it more accessible and useful for your space. And hopefully I'll actually get to setting some stuff on this wall soon. I guess that's pretty much everything, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.